Welcome everyone to the show. I'm J.J. Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's episode. Today we're talking about how beliefs can heal us, and I've been sitting on this interview for a couple of months or a little longer. This is Dr. Eben Alexander, best known for his first book, Proof of Heaven, where he spent, I believe it was a week, in a coma where doctors told him he would never recover, and if he came out, he would be brain dead. And of course, he had a full recovery and went on to create two more books, the most recent, Living in a Mindful Universe, where we did talk about a year ago, or a little over a year ago now, of some of that, and we're revisiting that today. So Dr. Eben Alexander spent over 25 years as an academic neurosurgeon, including 15 years at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, Children's Hospital, and Harvard Medical School in Boston. I first saw Dr. Alexander on Super Soul Sunday, and from that, bought Proof of Heaven for everyone I knew, read that beautiful book, would recommend everyone else also read it, and have been a fan ever since. Since his near-death experience, NDE, Dr. Alexander has dedicated himself to sharing information about near-death experiences and other spiritually transformative experiences and what they teach us about consciousness and the nature of reality. He continues to promote further research on the unifying elements of science and spirituality and encourages people to be inspired by the power of unconditional love in their daily lives and in their work in their communities. Welcome back, everyone. I have the distinct honor and pleasure of having back on Dr. Eben Alexander, who has written Proof of Heaven and most recently Living in a Mindful Universe. We already did a show called Proof of Heaven because when I saw you on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday, actually, it wasn't even Super Soul Sunday, was it? It was just regular Oprah show. Or no, it might have been. And I was...
Yes, it was Super Soul Sunday originally, yes.
Yeah, and I was fascinated by your story. And I felt like you gave so much content in that interview that I didn't buy the book yet. It wasn't until a therapist that I was working with said, "Have you read it?" And I said, "Oh, I know about the whole story." And she says, "Oh, no. You need to read it for the imagery." And then, of course, the catch at the end. So I have purchased your book for many people going through loss of people in their lives. And so what I wanted to talk about today, and I know your research and your knowledge and your experience and your mission now is so expansive, and there's so many things that we could talk about. But I think one of the things that comes up for me that I want to empower my audience as well as myself to leverage more of is to bridge that gap of mindfulness, of consciousness, of the power that we have connecting to non-physical energy, our own intuition, strengthening all those things in the area of healing.
Right.
Because it has come to, I've been through some things, and I know lots of people sometimes are too afraid to take risks outside of, let's say, Western medicine. And some people are too afraid to go into Western medicine. That was partly me. For some things, right? And so I know that I've been talking about this. Dawson Church was on the show, and we talked about what, things that Western medicine does well and what energy medicine does well. And so I want to know from your experience, from what you're now teaching, because you as a healer, even in Western medicine, being a brain surgeon, what's your position now on healing and what we have access to that maybe you didn't utilize before that you believe is a really good way for us to go in order to strengthen our own ability to heal?
Okay, well, that's an excellent question because I would say probably the most fundamental change I've been through, in addition to just a radical reversal of worldviews from materialism to idealism, is an understanding that the most reliable and profound evidence that our universe is a mental universe where mind has control over matter and modulates activity in matter is really in healing. For example, the medical profession in the Western world has, for more than 60 years now, used placebo effect as their gold standard for comparison of any new treatment modality. And this includes not only medicines, but also many procedures, surgical procedures, that you can actually assess kind of a sham procedure, to see the power of patients' beliefs. So the medical profession in our country, which still teaches, a very materialistic form of science to medical students, nursing students, in essence, for the last 6 decades or so, has been admitting that the power of a patient's beliefs are so robust in leading to healing that that's our gold standard. And roughly, as a rough estimate, probably 30% of the benefit that we we see in our modern Western medical treatments is probably just due to a patient's belief alone that they can get better. I mean, it's an incredibly powerful thing. And for those out there who think, oh, placebo effect is giving somebody a sugar pill and fooling them into thinking their headache should go away, I will also advise you, go to noetic.org, put in the search term on their website, spontaneous remission, and you will find a book they published that's freely available on the Noetic Sciences website, published in the mid-1990s, that basically covers 3,500 cases plus of advanced cancers, infections, even congenital deformities, and advanced degenerative diseases where the patient has tremendous improvement and not only gets rid of symptoms, but the disease goes away because of a patient's belief. So this is really kind of astonishing territory, and it's time for people to wake up and smell the coffee and realize that we've been admitting the power of mind over matter for decades, if not centuries, in the healing arts. And it's time to kind of reassess what's going on with all this and realize that, yes, we live in a mental universe where mind has tremendous power over matter. And that, to me, is one of the most profound lessons that comes out of the modern revolution in the relationship of brain and mind and nature of consciousness, is this admission of the power of free will to determine our health. And if free will has that much power over our health, you can imagine what it has to do with many of the other events in our lives. In spite of the fact that modern conventional materialist science would try and convince you that we don't even have free will, because they would basically say, well, brain is creating consciousness. It's all, the material in your brain, that 3.5-pound gelatinous mass sitting inside your skull in a warm, dark bath, having chemical reactions and electron fluxes, giving you an illusion of consciousness. Pay it no mind. That's what people like Daniel Dennett and hardcore materialist neuroscientists would try and convince you of the reality. And in fact, though, the modern world of neuroscience of consciousness, philosophy of mind, is going far away from the dismal and bleak fiction of materialist science that pretends the brain creates consciousness and our existence is birth to death and nothing more. Consciousness is a far bigger fish to fry. And so that's where I think it's all very exciting, because of where it opens the door to the individual seeker to investigate new ways of healing and of coming into oneness and wholeness with this universe, which I would say is really the journey of each and every one of us in our lives, is to determine more of our relationship with this universe. And that's where this awakening in consciousness and finding the primacy of consciousness in the universe is such a profound shift for all of our worldviews.
Are you still practicing at all as a surgeon?
Well, you can't do that part-time. And I discovered, I guess it was about 4 or 5 months before Proof of Heaven came out back in 2012, I was already giving a lot of talks on this, and I just found that it was no longer practical. I couldn't do my patients justice to try and do this life of sharing all of this extraordinary awakening in science and continuing to operate on patients, which takes a lot of time. You really got to put, 160 hours a week into that business if that's what you're doing. And I had to let it go, unfortunately, because I loved working with patients. I loved that I had a skill set that occasionally would benefit my patients, with, of course, their willingness, with their own free will and kind of belief system to help heal them. But I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Don't worry, all those years spent in neurosurgery were not wasted.
Absolutely. I know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and especially now, and that everything that led up to today contributed to what happened to you and what you're able to share now. So none of it was a wasted effort or at all a wrong step. It all built on each other to make this perfect divine timing and circumstance of creating this situation for you. Because without that, before your story, I had heard many near-death experience stories before. And like I mentioned on the last show, I've been listening to the teachings of Abraham for a long time. And there's a resonance in me about all of that answered questions, even without me experiencing it, what I believed happened when we died and when we transitioned, and that we were non-physical energy mostly, and that we don't ever die, and that it always recycles, and that we're always actually mostly non-physical. So all of that from the teachings of Abraham, I was, again, in alignment in my physical energy, like intuitively just got it. And then I'd hear Oprah used to do some of those people that had near-death experiences and have a panel of people on and talk about their experiences. And there were very similar themes and of how, people came up with their stories and what they experienced, and they weren't exact, but they were close enough. And so when you came on from a position of Western medicine and being a physician and a scientist, and you just really validated, again, that part of what a lot of us who, let's say, are intuitive first and scientific last. I'm very smart and I can understand science very well. But when I know something and when I feel that deep knowing, I don't feel the need to have to prove it anymore to myself. But I can't help more people unless I have people like you on and learn more myself to move the needle for those who need the science, who had a positive experience, right?
Yeah, I would just add that to me, one of the most astonishing and refreshing kind of realizations associated with my near-death experience from severe meningitis back in 2008 was in the year or two after that, as I came to realize that there literally are hundreds of scientists around this world studying consciousness who are far along this pathway. I thought, as do many people in kind of the lay public, that you've got science and then you've got religion, and that the science debunks all of this kind of near-death experience stuff. But in fact, the opposite is the case. There are a few uninformed, generally willfully ignorant scientists out there who still subscribe to materialism and a belief that brain creates consciousness and all that. But by and large, the vast majority of scientists that I know, and certainly those that I associate with a lot and communicate with a lot these days, are very far advanced in their kind of understanding of this. And it is so far beyond where the general public thinks our scientific elucidation of the nature of consciousness lies. And yet it's a science that fully realizes not only the afterlife, but reincarnation, and supports the much bigger version of consciousness, that we are sharing one mind, just as the fathers of quantum physics told us, and that we're really all bound together through the incredible force of love in that one mind. And understanding all this has everything to do with our own healing and becoming more whole. So for any of your audience who want to know more about the science, there's a very quick and easy website to bring them up to speed. It's called GalileoCommission.org. And I'm one of the 100+ scientific advisors on that Galileo Commission. Karen and I were over in London back in November 2018 to help launch that manifesto that anyone can read at GalileoCommission.org. But it's very stunning where the science is going now, and it's so far beyond what the materialist scientific world will admit to, and yet it makes a lot more sense. And it's what allows what you said a few minutes ago. The individual seeker doesn't have to wait for the overall scientific community to get on board with this, especially when you realize how many top-notch scientists around the world are already there, already realize that consciousness is not created by the brain, that we've got a whole lot more to figure out about this. And they admit to all the evidence that supports things like afterlife experiences and reincarnation. But we're just trying to figure out all the details and put it all together in a working system. But believe me, this is a gigantic revolution in human thought that's been building up for probably at least 5,000 years or more.
So I know we're going to talk about the binaural beats and the power of binaural beats for healing, but we're going to save that to the end. From now, though, I'd like to talk about first, what do you think the trajectory is of Western medicine incorporating some of these? And quickly, I'll tell you, because I recently had an experience, and my story is unfolding as we speak. It's not over yet. And I was going to do some podcasts on it. And I thought, you know what, this is going to be a book, not like a big book, but just a book specifically about this condition that I had, that I went and finally did all kinds of things and moved the needle a little bit. But there's lessons in this for me. And again, like I said, my story is not over. So I don't know what the outcome is, but it might be that I had to go through this situation to kind of reacquaint, because I don't go to doctors very often. It's very rare. And most of the time I go in telling them what I want. If it's a gynecologist, I say, here's the blood work I want. I got functional medicine physicians that I've been working with for 15 years who I trust implicitly are on top of all of the newest, greatest, latest with functional medicine and diet and natural healing and bioidentical hormones and flower essences and homeopathic remedies and acupuncture. So I don't tend to go Western medicine until I have to. And I had to. My body said, it's time. You need outside help now. And this is where we are. And so I went in and I found it very abrasive and very, here's what I want. And I got the sort of the nod of, okay, well, I recommend the opposite of that and not taking into consideration anything you want. And I got the overall feeling and I said, well, that's not going to happen. I basically said, you're going to do this procedure or not, yes or no. And I don't need to see the MRI. I don't need to see it. I just need to know, will you do it or not? And I got this feeling that whether it be, I can't tell if this is what I believe as a practitioner and I don't believe anything else, or I'm trying to cover my butt so I don't get sued. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go after like doctors. I thought for a second, doctors are like lawyers. They're looking for the absolute possible worst scenario, the risk that's maybe even 15 or 10%. And I'm going to hone in on the risk. And I'm going to say it's because of this risk. I'm going to tell you and recommend you do something that you are not interested in at all because there's no risk. And I'm like, it's a 15% risk. Okay, I'm willing to accept that risk. And I couldn't tell if it's the system or if it's the person or just the protecting legally. And so I'm kind of wanting to know your thoughts about where are we? Is there something happening in Western medicine where we can, because in that moment, it could have been handled very differently. In that moment, I understand from neuroscience that the bundles in my brain, if I was to focus on that negative, would have helped to create that. I would have continued to create more and more of that negative situation by focusing on it. And she wanted me to look at my MRI so I would be afraid so that maybe I would do this other procedure. And I wanted none of that. And so far, so good. Everything's good. But like, where is it that we don't understand this neuroscience as any practitioner, that when you give a diagnosis that's super scary, that's looking at, again, something with a very small percentage of actually happening, that you're helping the patient to create that negative scenario, and it could have gone very differently.
You bring up a whole lot of very interesting points. I think for one thing, it's important to point out that the medical profession, from my point of view, is shifting dramatically. Now, one of the issues you bring up is the whole issue of kind of malpractice and patient education about possible side effects and untoward outcomes and things like that. And of course, we have wrestled with that hugely. I would say the malpractice crisis in medicine has really been very damaging. It's chased a lot of physicians, many of whom were very good docs, have basically left the field. I know in neurosurgery, it's, there was a New England Journal of Medicine article back in, I think, 2011, and basically pointed out that your chance of being sued as a neurosurgeon in the United States is basically expect to be sued every 5 years on average. For the average neurosurgeon in our country, you will face a lawsuit every 5 years on average, okay? So obviously, if you've got a career, 20, 30 years in the field, you're going to have a lot of lawsuits lining up. And that doesn't mean you've committed malpractice. I had several of those suits, and I was never found guilty of malpractice. But it's created a very damaged kind of world. But there's some other facets that I want to bring up. And one is, for example, spirituality. If you go back 20, 25 years, basically, you didn't find courses on anything to do with spirituality and medicine in American medical school. But now I would say that probably more than half, and maybe as many as 70% or so, of our medical schools in the U.S. do have courses in spirituality that acknowledge the very real kind of impact that spirituality and spiritual considerations can have in healing. Now, they haven't gone as far as where I think we're going to go, especially as people begin to realize just how powerful placebo effect is, and that it's not just getting rid of symptoms, but often is actually getting rid of the disease, including congenital deformities, things that people are born with, things like that. So there is a shift. It's kind of slow, it's behind the scenes in many ways, but I think that modern medicine is slowly coming around to realizing how important spiritual considerations are in the healing arts. But even more so that we're beginning to really learn and admit how profound a patient's beliefs can be in their own healing. And this, of course, is where, from my point of view, it gets to be very interesting when I look at how, for example, we try to use sacred acoustics. We use very powerful tools of differential frequency brain entrainment in trying to treat people with various illnesses. Now, for example, recently there was a pilot study done with a psychiatrist in New York City, Dr. Aneurysms, who wrote a beautiful book called Fulfilled. And it's really about modern spiritual approaches to psychiatry. But anyway, she helped us with a study in her patient population in New York City that basically showed that something like sacred acoustics used for differential frequency brainwave entrainment for relaxation basically gave I don't know the exact numbers. I think it's 18%, somewhere between 18 and 26% healing, loss of anxiety and depression in a certain patient population that she studied by using sacred acoustics tones. And that's compared to about 7%, 7 to 9%. I don't remember the exact number for the control group, people who were just going through more standard therapy. So using these kind of tools to help people get more in touch with that kind of primordial consciousness, that mind that really is generating it all, I think is very helpful at leading us towards healing. And this is something we're just beginning to investigate. But people who want to learn more can go to sacredacoustics.com or can go to ebenalexander.com because we discuss a lot of these kind of findings. And we're coming up with other studies and to look at this in other settings, like in a hospice and palliative care setting, using the tones, sacred acoustics tones, to help engender episodes of terminal lucidity and possibly to enhance experiences, what's called a shared death experience, where people actually, their soul can go along on the journey with a loved one who is leaving the physical world through what are called shared crossing initiatives. And we're looking to enhance that kind of thing in hospice care and that kind of program. So very exciting work, but all of it very practical and looking at how powerful tools that help us get more in touch with our higher soul and with that primordial mind can be useful in healing.
What do you think the role is, and I still want to go over other tools too that either you've used or recommended, or maybe tools that people are doing that you're seeing working or that you've read in research? I know when I talked with Dawson Church about his book and studies, he mentioned a friend of his that was a cancer patient and how she basically, her cancer cells, her tumor died, and then she had no more cancer, and she never went through chemo or radiation, and she did everything from EFT, which is what he teaches, and he was doing remote EFT, and she was doing meditation every day. And so there were many therapies that she had applied. She would stop watching the news, which I thought was funny. Why was she watching the news in the first place? Maybe that's what gave her cancer. But what do you think the connection is between, or the strength of the connection? Because in the law of attraction work that I help people with, I get kind of a little nutty about the word mindset, because as heart math has studied, right, it's about our frequency from our heart. It's that we are emotional, vibrational beings, and the role of the mind with the heart in influencing our frequency and influencing our healing and influencing ourselves in that way. And so what do you think the connection is? Because again, I'm hearing you about the brain, and I'm totally with you on the brain. And then I'm wondering, well, but then are people actually feeling better? Are they doing actions that are just kind of going into the brain very specifically, but then they're not actually aware of how their frequency is in their body, in their emotions? Are they walking around fearful and angry? And because that's not going to produce healing. Or are they trying to reach for joy and reach for trust and surrender and freedom? So what do you think the role is in the power in connecting like there's the brain stuff, and then there's the brain and what it produces emotionally, frequency for us? What do you think that connection is?
Well, I think it's very important to start by pointing out that the brain does not create consciousness at all. I think more of what you're talking about here is the mind and the power of consciousness itself and of our kind of soul's will to influence how things unfold in our lives. And that certainly is a very powerful influence when it has to do with our health. So I think, and for me, it really simplifies things when we really get down to the mind and the concept of will. And also there's several other concepts or words I would like to throw into this mix. One is trust. Trust in the universe. Gratitude. Gratitude's a very important word in this whole discussion. Gratitude for all of the blessings in our life, gratitude for all of the features, and that includes the bad stuff, the illness and injury. I came to realize after my NDE that in so many ways it's better to look at those things as gifts, because the vast majority of our soul growth happens really when we face up to some of the hardships and difficulties. And this is also where I come to realize that any physical, mental, or emotional health or healing must fundamentally be based in a notion of spiritual health or healing. And when I use the word spiritual there, yes, it's true that some people gain their spirituality through religion and through prayer and things like that. And that's wonderful when it works for you. It turns out, though, that religions, although the original message of the prophets, I would say, is very much overlapping in its beautiful oneness and connectedness to the message of near-death experiences in general, that we are all connected through a force, through a being of love, acceptance, and mercy. And yet, I would say that this kind of broader understanding of it really allows us to fully facilitate the healing when we realize that our journey is much bigger than anything that could just be a birth to death incarnation in this one little body. And I think this is an important concept to start to get any of this and to use any of this effectively. Really benefits from having a bigger worldview and from looking at the big picture. And this is a lot of what we discuss in Living in a Mindful Universe. It's also available for free to people on my website. If people go to ebenalexander.com and right on that welcome page, there's a banner that wiggles in your face, your 33-day journey into the heart of consciousness. And I strongly encourage people to take that 33-day course. It's absolutely free. Some of the gifts that come with that will include some sacred acoustics recordings. But that 33-day course is a very powerful way to get people on board with understanding all these bigger concepts, and that includes how this kind of healing can work and how prayer, for example, prayer for me shifted. Before my coma, prayer very much involved kind of the supplicative form of asking for some healing or asking for this or that benefit, whereas after my coma, it's much more, prayer is much more an open admission of gratitude for all the blessings in my life, a suggestion for what I think might be a way for it to work out for the highest good for all involved, but leaving open a complete trust in the universe, thy will, not mine, be done, and a letting go of the final result. But I think what you'll find when you have that kind of spiritual liberation that admits, and after you take that 33-day course or read Living in a Mindful Universe, this will be very easy to do, admits that primacy of consciousness and the power of mind over matter. So that, we've been talking about placebo effect and how radical it is and how big pharma has to admit that roughly 30% of the benefit is due to a patient's beliefs. And that's a huge hurdle that they have to overcome at the get-go to even show a benefit for a proposed therapeutic intervention. So we're talking about some very powerful forces. The power of belief, and then once you have trust, once you have the bigger picture version of consciousness to realize that not only the afterlife, but reincarnation is a huge part of this. And the whole world of transpersonal psychology, the work of Stan Grof, Michael Newton, Brian Weiss, and others over the last few decades, has shown very clearly that we can make the best sense of this lifetime and the challenges we have in this lifetime when we acknowledge and explore the issues that were there in our previous lifetimes and in our soul groups have been converging. So it's getting this much bigger picture of a worldview, and then using these tools of going within, say with sacred acoustics, brainwave entrainment, using differential frequency sound. This is where we start to put together a big picture where the full power of a patient's beliefs, I think, can really come to the fore. And it also involves the beliefs of the healer, those of us involved in healing others, whatever it is, if it's energy healing or Reiki or neurosurgery or radiation therapy or whatever the many different things are that we use to try and heal people. The beliefs of the practitioner also have a tremendous role to play. So I know I've said a whole bunch of things here, but I'm trying to paint a bigger picture that really is one that can incorporate Western medicine, can incorporate various kind of alternative forms of healing, absolutely invokes the power of the beliefs of the healer and of the patient and of all involved to try and get to this kind of higher place. But it is one where we're not attaching so much to the physical healing, but we're really looking more for the emotional and spiritual lessons involved. I mean, why did we have the illness in the first place, or the injury? It's there as a teacher. And all of this business of recovering this higher sense of self, of knowing, the divine and sacred eternal beings that we all are, a huge part of dealing with illness and injury and the hardships of life is to grow into that being we came here to be. So we're really talking about the much bigger kind of soul work of growing into the souls we came here to be. And in essence, I would say fulfilling the mission of the very existence of this universe is to basically learn to know itself. The universe is here to know itself much more fully, and each and every one of us on our soul journey is doing exactly the same thing.
Which is why when I put out my new versions of my different podcast shows, my Spirit, Purpose, and Energy show was my most popular and still is to date, because people are searching for that. And so what I kind of heard and what you were talking about, we're using different language, but it means the same thing. To me, one of the highest frequencies we can be on emotionally is appreciation and gratitude and love and trust and surrender, right? So part of, when we're talking about gratitude and appreciation and love and freedom and knowledge and that perspective that you're talking about, that perspective, when you believe it, literally produces emotions of trust, of calm, of peace, of surrender, of freedom. It really by default gets you to the place you need to get to, where your body's in the best possible alignment it can be with who you really are and with the universe, which allows you to heal. And
Right.
so I'm glad that you approached it that way, because I think it takes us out of the myopic view of what it is that we're pinpointing, we're specifying, we're getting really specific. And too often, too many of us are too practical to go outside and think, well, I don't know. All I know is what's happening right here, right now. But time and time again, what I keep proving over and over to myself and sometimes to others is that the larger you go, when I personally connect with that I am a small speck of the universe, and I'm connected that the higher self of me is still there in non-physical energy, and that we're all energetically connected, I then am grounded. I'm not grounded going inside myself. That's too myopic for me. But going outside of myself and energetically connecting with everybody else on the planet and the world and the galaxy and the universe, okay, and God and source, all right, boom, I just got so expansive that now I'm centered and I'm calm and I'm peaceful and I have no anxiety and I have trust and I feel calm and appreciative and all the things that you mentioned.
I would say that is our natural state. And yet unfortunately, in our modern world, with all these little pings coming from my phone every time a new tweet comes out from the White House or what have you, it can be madness when you let this, all the insanity of our little world out there get in your way, as opposed to realizing that there is tremendous kind of peace and centering and sanity available within. But that doesn't just mean that you're, I think one of the most crucial lessons of this revolution in the understanding of consciousness that's coming to the scientific world and to many seekers over the last few decades is this understanding that consciousness is fundamental, that it really is one mind that we're all sharing. And so for me, the word spirituality is one that for many people invokes, religious belief and prayer and all that. But in essence, spirituality is just, I would say, has two main ingredients. One is an acknowledgement of the oneness of mind, just as quantum physicists discovered, 80 years ago and are just beginning to really learn as a hard fact around consciousness. There really is one mind. And that's why I think Living in a Mindful Universe is such an important book, because it tends to bring together science and spirituality through looking at the leading edges of the scientific revolution around consciousness today, which takes its lead from quantum physics and from the hard problem of consciousness and philosophy of mind to take us into territory where you realize that the whole physical universe emerges out of the realm of mind, and that in fact there is really one mind that's doing all that mental activity, and we share that mind. Now we have this notion that we have our own little individual, Eben Alexander's little consciousness in my head, and I have all my memories of my life, but that's not who I am. And by meditation, by going within consciousness, I can start to explore that and realize that I can get outside. That meditation is a very powerful technique that can lead to things like out-of-body experiences, remote viewing. I mean, it can be very powerful for telepathic communications, precognition, knowing the future. I mean, going within mind is extremely powerful, and why anybody in this world today pretends to have any word to say at all about consciousness when they haven't spent years actively exploring the realms of mind is beyond me. I used to claim that before my coma as a neurosurgeon. Oh yes, I'm interested in consciousness. Yeah, well, guess what? I had meditated some when I was in college. We did it. I was on the parachuting team, and we would do these free fall formations, something called relative work. And we found that when we use Silva mind control, this is back in the early 1970s, we would meditate before our jumps and we practiced the free fall maneuvers, and we found we did a lot better. But I let all that go. I didn't realize how powerful meditation could be in so many parts of our life. And so after I finished college and finished skydiving, went to medical school, I left all the Silva mind control and meditative work behind. But in the year and two after my coma, I came to realize if I'm going to have any remote clue of understanding how to interpret that experience I went through, I need to meditate. I need to go within and explore consciousness. And especially as you realize that there's tremendous concrete evidence in the modern scientific view of the primacy of mind, you realize that traversing the veil, going deep within consciousness, is a profoundly important way to get out into this universe and to discover our, the nuts and bolts of our relationship. How much information can we actually discern from this universe? We can discern a lot more than we can if we believe that we just sit there and can only know information that we gain from our eyes and our ears in the local environment, because there are ways we can know far, far more than that. And that kind of knowledge has a tremendous amount to do with healing and with really growing into the soul we came to this world to be. So fundamentally, that idea of spirituality as a notion of mind and connectedness of mind that we all share, and it's not just humans, of course, this is with all life throughout the cosmos. So this one mind is a very important idea, but also the notion that there is meaning or purpose. I would say that is the second major ingredient of spirituality and a definition of spirituality, that this is not just some random crapshoot, in the universe with God playing dice and who cares where it all goes because it's all just mechanistic statistical abilities? Or is there something to it? Is it going somewhere? And from my point of view, absolutely it is going somewhere. And I take the lead on that from a brilliant writer in the mid-20th century, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who wrote The Phenomenon of Man, I think 1959. And I know he caught some grief in from materialist scientific circles. He was a paleontologist and a French Jesuit priest. So he was very spiritually advanced, but also knew a tremendous amount about science and about evolution and history because of his work in paleontology. But that's where his book gains so much power, because it takes a very kind of misled misinterpretation of Darwinian evolution that some scientists in the mid-20th century were trying to promulgate, which was basically saying it's all random, chaotic, has no purpose at all, and it's just survival of the fittest, and competition is the only thing that wins, etc. And most biologists in the latter part of the 20th century and 21st century come to realize that any success in the biological world is absolutely due to collaboration and cooperation, not only between members of a species, but between species. For example, when you see examples of dolphins serving as midwives for the birthing of whale calves and things like that. I mean, just some absolutely astonishing examples. And it just shows you that there is so much more going on that involves our being together, working together, sharing this one mind, helping each other. And for me, the biggest and most profound message that comes out of the whole world of near-death experiences, which when combined with the modern neuroscience of consciousness, go a long way towards telling us exactly what the afterlife, life between lives, life reviews, planning next incarnations, reuniting with our higher soul and with souls of departed loved ones, all of that gigantic process that's been described for thousands of years across millennia, across all continents, no matter what people's belief systems. These stories from NDEs have been coalescing into a brilliant picture of, the bigger aspects of our existence in this universe, far beyond just the little birth to death in one little body. And all of this is important. But the good news is we can come to learn it all through personal exploration, through meditation, going within. And that's where I think sacred acoustics is so powerful, and a lot of the tools that we mentioned, not only in that 33-day course, the free email course on ebenalexander.com, but also a brand new program that Karen came up with in all of her brilliance. Karen Newell, my partner and co-author of Living in a Mindful Universe, came up with the Inner Sanctum Center, and people who are interested go to innersanctumcenter.com and start investigating. But that is really kind of the next step beyond our 33-day course into the heart of consciousness, to really help people get to the next level in this revolution of understanding of the shifting paradigm in the scientific world. But not only that, the tools and kind of shared experiences from so many others who are on this journey. And for example, in that 33-day email course on my website, more than 8,000 people have taken that course to date, people from all over the world. Many leave their comments, and there's a translate button there, so all different languages are participating. They're all helping each other and growing and basically forming a community of like-minded souls, because this really is about all of us helping each other and coming to a higher realization of our potential as human beings.
And I'm sure there are community members from my show who are there also. Since your first appearance, we did promote the 30-day free course, and we're going to do it again. So anyone who's watching this on video, it is underneath the video, all the links that were mentioned on today's episode. If you are listening to this on the podcast, you can look at the show notes. I actually will put the links in the show notes. And of course, you're always welcome to email me if you don't understand where it all is. And of course, go to drebenalexander.com as the first place to go.
Right, it's ebenalexander.com.
Oh, it's not doctor. EbenAlexander.com.
EbenAlexander.com.
EbenAlexander.com. I just want to encourage everybody one more time, wherever you are in this journey, if this is the first time you're hearing Dr. Eben Alexander speak about near-death experience, I would really strongly encourage that you get proof of heaven first and foremost, especially if you're someone who's more right-brained and you're more about the feelings and the imagery and something that really stimulates you. Now, if you're the scientist, if you're the left-brain linear person and you need the science, then jump to Living in a Mindful Universe right away. But everyone really would benefit from reading Proof of Heaven, because he takes you on a journey in the book on the other side. And so you will be engaged not only in your mind, but in your body and in your emotions. And I think this is the place to really stimulate the curiosity of how to learn more about this. I mean, all of the books are great, but I'm really recommending Proof of Heaven if you haven't had experience before. And of course, get Living in a Mindful Universe. And of course, we're going to talk about sacred acoustics more. Karen is coming back on the show. And again, we'll put all the links. There is a free link for a free download for the sacred acoustics. And just quickly, can we just address, because there are different kinds of programs within sacred acoustics, different, like I know there's one on health and healing. I know there's one for anxiety. Can we talk about what the differences are and where you would recommend, besides the free one, where people might start and why they would want to do it?
Yeah, well, I think one thing to point out is Karen's done a very, very good job on her website. She has a page there, I want to ... And then all the different things that people want to do if they want to connect with the soul of a departed loved one, if they're working on their own anxiety or depression, or kind of heart tension over childhood wounds, or if they're looking for creativity in their work, or they're looking to investigate their own abilities to heal various physical or mental or emotional issues they have, whatever. All the different ways that people use meditation, she has a page there that will then prescribe exactly what the appropriate products are in sacred acoustics. Because there is a whole family of different products that can work for different goals, depending on what you want to do. And I'm like a kid in a candy store, because I'm kind of an alpha listener to sacred acoustics. I get to hear all the fresh stuff fresh out of the gate. Have this amazing repertoire on my computer of the basically 8.5 years of work of Karen and Kevin Cossey, her sound engineer. And I really am like a kid in a candy store. It's fantastic stuff. And of course, there's now an app, a Sacred Acoustics app. But the best way to get Sacred Acoustics products least expensively is do it through sacredacoustics.com. Do it through a website. And that includes everything that you might want to get on the app, because if you bought it on her website, it then is delivered free in the app setting. So she explains all that on sacredacoustics.com. But I would strongly advise people go there. And also, she has some training videos on sacredacoustics.com. I think it's about 1 hour and 20 minutes total. They're in like 9 and 10 minute segments. They're all kind of titled appropriately to help in what you want to do and what information you need in there. But her website is a very rich source of information for a true seeker who wants to gain these tools and wants to learn how to really run with all this. And we get more and more reports from people around the world who are getting really beautiful benefits out of using sacred acoustics tones in their meditative practice. And it's all about becoming more of who we came here to be, learning more about our relationship with the universe, given that, in fact, given this fundamental role of consciousness in the universe, essentially we are all one with the universe. And it's kind of developing and enriching our understanding of that intersection that is so important, so that in meditation we can glean different kind of channels of information, abilities, techniques for the information to be delivered to us from the universe. We develop a certain trust in the capabilities of the universe to do that for us. And that's where all this really gains some power. But I would strongly encourage people, not only that 33-day course on the ebenalexander.com website, which does include some free Sacred Acoustics offerings, but also go to Sacred Acoustics itself, because Karen does a wonderful job of communicating with all of her clients, and has a website that is extremely informative there to help people no matter where they are. If you never meditated before, she can take your hand and take you right that way. And a lot of her website is set up depending on experience level. If you've meditated for 40 years, you're a very advanced meditator, there are still ways that Sacred Acoustics can help you get even more in touch with that, with the spiritual realm and with your meditative power. Not only gleaning the information from the universe, but also being able to effectively manifest the free will of our higher soul. That's where the healing, the true healing, comes into play. And just as placebo effect is an obvious example of how our beliefs have true concrete power in offering up physical, mental, emotional health to us in this world. But we come to realize that I think, for example, near-death experiences are a whole higher level of healing given our spiritual relationships and our understanding of our oneness with the universe. And that, for example, there's, I think since the last time I was interviewed on your podcast, there's been a case report, a medical case report on my medical records. It came out in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases in September of 2018. And anyone interested in that case report can go to ebenalexander.com, go to my blog postings. I wrote a blog about how a recent medical report validated the medical facts of my case. And the interesting thing about that case report, you can get right to it in the fourth paragraph of that blog posting, where I have a link to, so people can go right to the 4-page case report. But the things that to point out and that my blog elucidate there is that they had trouble getting it published because some of the basically the peer reviewers didn't think that somebody could recover from this kind of illness, that it was absurd to think that these medical facts, that was what haunted me when I read my medical records, talked with my doctors in the first months after my coma. I thought, these are not the medical records of someone who goes on to a full recovery. This is of someone who goes on to die. And so haunting is the best word I can use for it, but it really is astonishing. But what these doctors in a peer-reviewed medical report said to explain this miraculous recovery that has no explanation in Western medicine was they postulated that it was the spiritual contents of my NDE that resulted in my miraculous healing. Because they also knew of other cases. For example, Anita Morjani, who wrote the book Dying to Be Me. She had an advanced stage 4 lymphoma, was down to 85 pounds, should have been dead within hours. Any doctor who reads that report of her going into the Hong Kong emergency room in February of 2000 would realize, well, wait a minute, she's a goner. Well, no, she's not. She ended up having a profound near-death experience in which she understood the reason she had the cancer in the first place had to do with her fear of cancer. She learned tremendous lessons on that journey and came back to this world knowing that her cancer would disappear, which it did. Another beautiful case would be that of Dr. Mary C. Neal. She wrote a book called To Heaven and Back. She was an orthopedic surgeon, was kayaking in Chile in the late 1990s and had an accident where her kayak went deep underwater. The bow was broken underneath some boulders. Her legs were broken. She was pinned underwater for more than 30 minutes. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a neurosurgeon to tell you that 30 minutes in a warm water drowning is way too long. She actually recovered from it. They brought her up from the bottom, resuscitated her. She had a long and kind of challenging recovery, but she had a full recovery, went back to work as an orthopedic surgeon, but also travels the world, as I do, changing the worldview by sharing her near-death experience, because her spiritual journey was a profound part that occurred in her NDE, was a profound part of her healing. And so when we look at these kind of concrete examples of how a deep kind of spiritual relationship with the universe can help facilitate physical, mental, and emotional healing, I think we can learn a lot, and it has a tremendous amount to do with how I think healing in our modern world will be shifting over the next decade or so as we come to more fully acknowledge the power of our beliefs in promoting our health.
Anita lives down the street and is a friend of a dear friend, and I will be inviting her on the show. She's been on my mind, so I will be inviting her on the show as well, because I do know about her story. Dr. Wayne Dyer talked about her story all the time and shared her story as well.
Anita is a very valuable soul for this world, because she's been on an extraordinary journey. She is a beautiful sharer of that journey, and I know I think sometimes people might have a little trouble hearing this business about their higher soul actually planning something like a cancer. But listen to the way Anita puts it. She has some deep and profound lessons to share that I think are a real beautiful gift to this world. And it just shines right through. So yeah, she is a wonderful one to have on your podcast. I can highly recommend people who haven't read her books, go right out and get them, because she's written several books now on all of this. I think her third book is coming out soon. But at any rate, highly recommended. And also Mary C. Neal. Mary has done a beautiful job of sharing her journey and a lot of valuable lessons about healing. And ultimately, that's what it's really all about. And we all share that message. That one thing that our world seems to have lost so much track of is the fact that all of this kind of healing and blessing in our lives can be there when we recover that profound sense of love, compassion, kindness, acceptance, mercy, and when necessary, forgiveness for our fellow souls. And all of these ingredients, when you combine gratitude, lead to tremendous capacity for healing and becoming more of the soul we came to this world to become.
So, I could keep you here all day, and I know you and I both have plans for the rest of the week and for the rest of the month, but I could keep you here all day. I'd like to, be fair.
I love talking with you. I've enjoyed it very much, and I always enjoy coming on, so I hope we can do it again someday.
We can, and I want to invite you to, you said, since the last time we talked, this peer-reviewed journal about your medical records.
Yes.
Something like that, when you're in a situation where you've uncovered something, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to share this with everybody. Feel free to reach out to me and I will put you right on, because I, like you, I have a lot of Sag. I know you're Sag. And I want to share the latest, greatest thing that can change people's lives like today. And if you have a tool, I want to share it. I don't want people to suffer because they don't have to. And I want to give them tools that feel right and aren't, they're not following down a path that's just going to lead to more drugs and depression and feeling powerless. I want to give people their power back. And the work that you're doing and the work that I'm doing is doing that. And so again, you are welcome anytime. You just let me know you have some new study, some new thing, some new product, some new discovery, and I am happy to shout it from the rooftops. So you are welcome at any time. I thank you very much. And of course, yes, I will reach back out, because your information, you again, I'm attracting and working with more and more people who, again, are that middle brain, which is what I think I am, like left and right brain, who are taking that scientific, respectful information approach, as well as the spiritual and emotional. And we're finally combining them in a way that is making a difference, that people are listening to, that more people can't deny. And there's enough evidence that no one can say it's woo-woo anymore. It's real.
Right.
It's real.
In fact, there's no way out for science other than to come to explain and more richly explore how mind is fundamental in the universe, a position known as ontological or metaphysical idealism. It's what Karen and I discuss very completely in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe. It's how spirit and science are coming together. But for any, for the scientific world, anyone who thinks that hardcore materialism will ever get out of understanding quantum physics, ignoring consciousness, is in for a rude awakening. And that is no. The whole reason they've spent 80 years circling the drain in so much trouble over this is because they've not admitted that consciousness is fundamental in the universe. We do live in a world of a mental universe. Anyway, this it's important for everyone to get this, because it's so crucial in understanding the bigger kind of theater of our lives and of our very existence. So it's high time we got this. I'm so glad that you'll be having Karen on, because you'll find, and I think your audience will find, she has a tremendous amount of spiritual wisdom and also very practical wisdom about healing, and she can discuss a lot more of the latest protocols, some of that work with Dr. Anna Yusum in the follow-up studies, and we're actually working on a teacher practitioner kind of course that we'll probably put online this fall that Karen can go into more detail about.
I'm looking forward to it. It'll be her second time on the show as well. And I will be, you have my word. It may not be this fall, but when you do your live practitioner course in person, I will be at one of them in the near future. You have my word.
Excellent.
And maybe we can do some live recording there as well on off hours, or do a piece about the training. So again, I thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and your passion and your purpose and your mission and your experience and your knowledge and your vulnerability and all your information to both my audience and to the world, because as you and I spread more of this around, it continues, and we're doing the best we can to make a difference and to be in constant state of gratitude and joy. So thank you so much, Dr. Alexander, for coming on the show again.
Well, JJ, thanks so much for having me. As always, great talking with you. Thanks so much.